At first glance, this MSI gaming PC is some solid core parts wrapped in gimmicks, and that's exactly what it turned out to be. While the case is interesting and it definitely has some unique features as a whole, the more we used it, the more little things we were let down by, with the only real exception to that being the hardware performance. When we first got the MSI MEG Vision X AI, I was excited and curious to see whether this was just another case of meaningless AI being slapped on it for the sake of a big trendy name, or if it actually meant something. Sadly, it falls into the same buzzword category as basically everything else does. Think of the countless little programs that have been rebranded as AI, home appliances, toothbrushes, iPhone screen protectors, and even thermal paste. Before we get too far, let's go over the specs. There are two versions of this PC. The main difference being the graphics card, which is either a 5080 or 5090. The rest of the PC is made up of a Z890 Project Zero motherboard, an Intel Ultra 9285K, 360mm AIO, 64 gigs of DDR5 6000 RAM, and a 2TB PCI Express 5.0 SSD. The power supply also changes based on the GPU. With the 5080, you get an 850 watt model, but it's actually not super clear what the 5090 comes with. Every website claims something different. MSI.com says 1200 watts, the US MSI store says it's still an 850, Best Buy says it has 1000, but luckily two sites agree, with both us.msi.com and Newegg listing it as 1300 watts. RAM speed is also conflicting between the main MSI and United States specific MSI pages being either 5600 or 6000, and in our case, the speed wasn't even set properly in the BIOS, where it should have been set to 6000, it was only at 4800, which by itself isn't a huge deal, but it is a pre-built, and there's a good chance whoever buys this won't think to check RAM speed or know how to fix it in the BIOS, and this costs so much that you would expect a little bit better QC on MSI's side. For connectivity, on the motherboard, there are two Thunderbolt 4 ports, a 10 gigabit per second USB-C that also supports 15 watt power delivery, 7 total USB-A ports, 3 of which are 10 gigabit and the other 4 are 5 gigabit. There's also a 5 gigabit Ethernet jack, antenna ports for Wi-Fi 7, and line in and out 3.5mm audio jacks. The 5080 has 3 DisplayPort 1.4A and 1 HDMI 2.1, and the front of the case has 2 more 5 gigabit USB-As, along with a 10 gigabit USB-C and line in and out audio jacks, which I prefer over the combo front jack that other pre-builts tend to use. The case also has an integrated mic and speakers, which seems like a cool idea, but the sound quality is not great by any means. It'd be good enough for a voice assistant or something if for some reason you're still rocking with Cortana in 2025, but that's about it, and realistically you'll probably just use the Bluetooth 5.4 and a wireless headset instead.
The quick brown fox jumped over the lazy dog. The quick brown fox jumped over the lazy dog.
There is some good upgradability though, since this thing uses standard form factor parts and has empty slots for one M.2 SSD, 2 3.5-inch drives, and one 2.5-inch drive. Keep in mind that when upgrading that spare M.2 slot only supports PCI Express 4.0, and if you want to swap out the 5080 for something better down the road, keep an eye on the power supply because the 850 watt it comes with is already the minimum recommended rating. Now, for the outside of the case, it feels sturdy. The dual chamber design is definitely interesting and has plenty of RGB lighting for all you gamers' needs. I do worry about the durability of the finish, mainly of the back side panel. It looks like it's just a thin film layer over a bright silver stamped steel sheet. Looking at the other side, the glass panel has giant black bezels, which between that and the general case design makes it hard to appreciate the Project Zero motherboard's lack of exposed wires. And when you take off the glass panel, it's clear why those bezels are so much bigger than other cases. The guides that the glass slots into are bulky, unfinished sheet metal, so it's best to keep the case closed if you're trying to mug on the haters with this PC, but it also has a lot of reflection when you're trying to film, so we took it off for filming this A-roll. The bezels also have a weird dot gradient, almost like a car windshield, which in my opinion doesn't fit the aesthetic on the rest of the case and just makes it look like a microwave. One thing your microwave doesn't have though is a 13-inch touchscreen, which in this case is a 1080 by 1920 60Hz IPS level display with an 11.6 degree angle for easier interaction. It's used for the human machine interface, or HMI, but before we get into that, we need to address the brains of the operation, MSI Center. It comes installed from the factory, which in theory would be nice, but in our experience, it was busted. It kept prompting us to make a local admin account whenever we tried to use any functionality, even though we were already the local admin and the sole account for the PC. And to get it to work, we had to uninstall the app and download it and install it ourselves. It's the same as the RAM speed issue. It's not a big deal, but an inconvenience nonetheless. Not the experience you would expect from a pre-built, especially for the required app used for the main gimmick of the product. Once you finally do get the app working, you then have to download plugins for each feature you want. And after a healthy amount of troubleshooting, it can be used to control fan curves, lighting, some hardware monitoring, and it even has an optional AI engine to control it all for you, which maybe sounds cool, but I cannot notice for the life of me a difference in anything, whether the AI engine is turned on or off. But if you're someone who just likes to press buttons that don't really seem to do anything, this could be perfect. Also, there aren't many different lighting options, so while you can customize it, it's still pretty limited, especially if you want to sync the case lights with the fans and RAM. For that, there's only 7 options: steady, breathing, flashing music, CPU temperature, wave, and color cycle. The last 2 of which are both rainbow with no color changing options, and the others are just solid colors. You can't have it fade or cycle between any. And as for the HMI on the touchscreen, it is fairly convenient and can be used for app shortcuts, hardware monitoring, changing fan profiles, lighting settings, etc. You can customize the background and UI colors, but the UI itself doesn't look great. It's just very basic gradient bars. Granted, you can rearrange them so what you use is more accessible. You can also minimize or close the HMI and just use it as a second monitor. If you want to put the display to sleep, that has to be done through the HMI, or instead of putting it to sleep, you can do what we did and put a webcam inside the case and use OBS to route the video feed to the front display, essentially making a worse looking fish tank case with extra steps. A big reason we did all that camera junk was that the HMI was just really glitchy. Sometimes when minimizing, maximizing, or changing colors, it would crash and or max out the CPU and require us to go into Task Manager, force close, and reopen. There was also a weird window flicker after changing the UI colors, which again requires you to hard restart the app to make it stop. The UI colors also don't save sometimes, and there's no reset to default button or ability to make presets, which is just annoying. Good news is that the display uses the CPU's integrated graphics, so it won't bog down the 5080. And while there is the 11.6 degree angle towards you, if you're sitting close to your desk, it's still not really in your field of view since it's so much closer to you than an actual normal monitor would be. If you angle the PC so the screen is more facing you, then you're hiding the side window, and if you use more than one monitor, which is highly likely if you're getting this expensive of a PC, it'll be even further outside your vision and less convenient to use the touchscreen. When it comes to the value, this entirely misses the mark. When we first got this PC back in April, it cost $4,500, which was already a lot. Back then, you could build a gaming computer with the same specs with all MSI parts and a height Y70 touch for just under $4,000. But that would also get you better potential warranties, as MSI includes only a 1-year limited warranty. But then for whatever reason, this thing jumped up a full grand while we were writing this video, making it $5,500. And to top it off, it's either out of stock or no longer carried at major retailers like Newegg or Best Buy, but you can still find it for like $5,500 on sites like Exotic PC or Excalibur PC. The DIY version has had a $350 bump up to $4,350, but if you stay away from some of the frankly overpriced MSI parts, you can get everything to build it yourself for about $4 grand and still in the Y70 touch. Plus, there's still plenty of cheaper part options if you want to cut costs, but we all know you can save by building yourself, and price isn't always the most important factor for some people. So in my opinion, if you're going to spend $5,500, get a Falcon Northwest Tiki. I know we just did a review and talked about how expensive it is, but you can get one with a non-K Ultra 9 285 and the same graphics card, RAM, storage, and a better 1000 watt power supply for $54.94. And you'll get a much better warranty and great service, and it's slimmer. And when you aren't fiddling with the MSI Center software or the gimmicks, it performs exactly as you would expect it to, has plenty of power and can play most games in 4K Ultra natively, but is much more comfortable with upscaling or dropping the resolution to 1440. We ran tests in 14 of our usual 20 games simply because we ran out of time, but when we started testing this pre-built, we noted it uses the same 285K we use in our main benchmarking build, and about halfway through our testing of this MSI pre-built, all the results were within 1% or 2% of the 5080s we've tested before, so we'll do the rundown here, and if you're curious about how different 5080s can perform, you can go check out our original 5080 review right up there. One thing to keep in mind that did change between our previous 5080 benchmarks and this PC was the temperatures. In this MSI PC, the GPU ran at about 70 degrees Celsius under gaming loads, compared to other 5080s in our test rig staying steady at 60 degrees. But again, there wasn't more than a couple percent difference when it comes to the number of frames they could crank out. And the temps can be easily explained by the case. Our test PC uses an Asus TUF Gaming GT502 with 12 fans, as opposed to this case's only 6. And while this pre-built case looks like you could put more fans in the bottom for more fresh air, you can't. There is a vent there that features the only dust filter of the case. There is a metal mesh panel riveted in place and no fan screw holes. Why they did that is anyone's guess. But let's dive into the numbers. We ran 3 synthetic benchmarks. 3D Mark Steel Nomad scored 8318, Passmark got an overall score of 17,187 with the CPU, 2D, and 3D scores being on the screen, and Geekbench got a single core score of 3105, multi-core score of 22,178, and the GPU score scored big numbers. Look at them on the screen. Now, on to gaming. Monster Hunter Wilds at 4K Ultra Native with ray tracing was able to get 56 average FPS with decent 1% and 0.1% lows. If you turn off ray tracing, you get an additional 6 FPS for an average of 62. Lowering it to 1440, still with ultra settings, it got 84 FPS with ray tracing enabled, or 91 FPS with it disabled. Cyberpunk was a lot more punishing at 4K native resolution and ultra settings. It was able to run at 42 FPS, and if you turn on ray tracing, it drops to 31. Going to 1440 with the same settings, it got 89 FPS, and with ray tracing, it just barely missed the 60 FPS mark at 58. We were able to play Black Ops 6 at exactly 60 FPS at 4K Ultra, and Counter-Strike got all the way up to 200 FPS, again at 4K max settings. For the total 14 game averages, in 4K Ultra Native, it averaged 101 FPS with 58 1% and 47.1% lows. 4K Ultra with quality upscaling got 133 average, and 1440 with Ultra Native settings got 145 FPS average. Overall, the MSI MEG Vision X AI can play games and do everything other similarly spec PCs can do just fine. But essentially, everything that makes this one special is a headache. The software design isn't great, the front screen isn't very convenient to use, and even when everything is working, 90% is just gimmicks, none of which is helped by the price, especially after the $1,000 increase in inventory being a crapshoot. Simply put, I cannot recommend this thing right now, or ever, but I can recommend it if it's free, which is currently the plan. We're going to be giving this away over on our Twitch live stream, twitch.tv/UFDtech, at some point later this year. Currently, as of the release of this video, we do have a giveaway going on for a 5090 gaming PC, but the MEG Vision X AI will be on the list at some point in the near future, as will the Razer Blade 18 be on that list as well. So you can come check us out, twitch.tv/UFDtech, in case you're interested in a free PC. The gimmicks are great if they don't cost anything.